South Africa's unemployment rate for the third quarter fell by 1.4 percentage points to 32.1%. That's from 33.5% in the previous quarter. Meanwhile, the expanded definition of unemployment decreased marginally to 12.2 million. The Eastern Cape, Western Cape and Northwest saw the biggest increase in employment. However, jobs were shared in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. More people were employed in both the formal and informal sectors. Discouraged work seekers jumped by 5% to 160,000. The youth remained the most vulnerable in the labor market, while the total number of unemployed youth decreased by 171,000 people to 4.8 million. The youth unemployment rate remains high at 45.5%. For more on these unemployment numbers, I'm joined by Mashiane, founder of the United Domestic Workers of South Africa, and Marc Lubner, Africa Tikkun executive chairperson. Good afternoon to both of you. Thanks very much for your time. I'm going to start with you, Pinky, if I may. I'm looking at all these numbers. They don't mean much in the bigger scheme of things today. Hi, Pinky. I don't know if you can hear me. I was saying, looking at these numbers, even though they show decreases or a decrease in unemployment, fact of the matter is that in the bigger scheme of things, they hardly mean much, if anything.
Good afternoon. Yes, I was saying it's like a norm to domestic workers that every year we'll see the numbers of domestic workers who have lost job. But what I've also observed is that it has been 800 and something thousand since from COVID time, when a big number of domestic workers lost job during that time. They are slowly recovering from that, but they are domestic workers who are never called back to work. But if we look, there's still a need for domestic workers in private household. That's why you are seeing the number staying at about 800 and something thousand, not lower than that. So it shows that there are still many households in South Africa who still need domestic workers in their houses. And I always say that domestic work will not be swept away or disappear, because people will always need domestic workers to look after their children, to look after their parents, to take care of their houses. There are people who don't have time to take care of their houses or their children. So domestic workers are essential workers. Hence, we see every year they are there on the statistics that this number of domestic workers have lost jobs. It shows the importance of domestic workers in this economy of the country.
Of course, Marc, looking at the numbers of unemployed young people in particular, stood at 4.8 million, but the number of employed youth recorded, though it recorded an increase of 66,000 to 5.8 million. Fact of the matter is that it is still very, very high.
It definitely is, particularly when you start to look at the numbers that are unemployed against those that are employed. Almost 45% is the official statistic of young people unemployed. And I'll tell you what's particularly upsetting is that the young people of South Africa, having grown up on cell phones, on technology, they want jobs. They don't want to have a Facebook profile saying unemployed and on social grants. They, from their own pride perspective, want jobs. So you've got a huge percentage of our population who actively are pursuing working opportunities and are not content to simply just go on to social grants.
But from where you sit, Marc, is there a plan? Is there someone out there who is really working around the clock and saying, can we think about doing things differently?
The quick answer to that question is yes. I think that civil society, government in particular, of late, in fact, and corporates are starting to realize that the old models of just using, let's call it CSI contributions or enterprise development spend, are not necessarily addressing the numbers quickly enough. We've got rising youth who are getting increasingly agitated within communities across South Africa. So there are initiatives. I'm quite excited to in fact, mention that I've been honoured, in fact, to be included in an initiative with BUSA, Business Leadership South Africa, and a presidential commission to look at programs that can help address this youth unemployment crisis. You know, youth employment isn't simply about just creating any old job and putting any old person in that position. That's not addressing the productivity issue that we've got in this country. What we have to do is we've got to find the right skills and match them with the right job opportunities. And there are wonderful initiatives. Harambee, which is placing over 1 million young people in well-suited jobs. Africa Tikkun, my organization, is involved in addressing skills development from an early stage. In fact, we started early childhood development phase all the way through to after schools and then job skills for specific industry sectors. So we are looking at, you know, sunrise industries, looking at where can skills training be best put to use. Yeah, obviously, in the ICT tech space, we can look at, you know, BPOs being established in South Africa at a rand cost that could service hard currency companies overseas. There are a number of organizations like NASPERS that's looking at how do they look at the skills that are going to be required and then motivate organizations like ourselves to ensure that we only get paid against placements, or portion on recruitment and training, and a portion on placements. Job Boost is another one of those initiatives. So yes, sorry, long answer to your question. There are very definite moves afoot to do things differently. I'm encouraged by them, but I don't think they're happening necessarily fast enough or with enough impetus.
Pinky, I mean, listening to Marc there talking about what his organization is doing together, of course, with other organizations that have come to the party, including your business unity, South Africa, your sector must be particularly difficult to, organize in, because how do you bring together households, you know, and say, we want more jobs, you know, for domestic workers?
That's an unfortunate sad truth that when domestic workers are dismissed from work, they disappear. They go to homelands in rural areas. They never come back to the cities. If they could have been united the way we want them to be united, we would approach even the higher education, the SETA Services Education Training Authority, and say, this is a number of domestic workers who have lost jobs. Domestic workers already have skills. So give us something for formality so that domestic workers can work and have make money for themselves while they are unemployed as domestic workers. Unfortunately, as you are saying, the sector is scattered and they are working as individuals. They disappear, they suffer in poverty. Others go home after working for 40 years with nothing to show that they've worked for 40 years, as the sector is a very vulnerable sector amongst all sectors in South Africa. That's a sad story about domestic workers. And mostly those domestic workers who are dismissed are not in unions, because if they are, our members, who will do something about them. As well, I was speaking, and Marc was also speaking about skills development programs. As I've said, that we can approach and even the business people and say, these are domestic workers, they already have skills, they just need to make money for themselves, they need work. They can cook, they can clean, they can do anything, we can do anything. The problem is how do we put them together, how do we bring them together after they've lost their jobs.
But are those conversations taking place, Pinky, where it matters?
The conversations.
Yes. Are the conversations, the issues you're raising about the plight of domestic workers, are those conversations taking place in Parliament, for example? Are there conversations taking place where, with the departments of labor, for example?
Domestic workers are always on their own. It is us who need to approach. I did approach some labor officials. That's when I was directed to higher education, that SETA services are with the higher education. As I'm saying that our members, we don't have a big number of members who have lost their jobs. They are still working. We are lucky that our members can negotiate with their employers. They are still keeping their jobs. We are concerned about those who are not unionized, those domestic workers who don't know anything about unions. But if they can come to us, then we can do something. We can approach the Department of Higher Education. We can even approach the Labour Department for assistance, as it also is working. Even these days, it's been very busy with domestic workers. It held a workshop in Eastern Cape and recently in Free State. This coming Saturday is going to be in Northwest Rustenburg. So they are trying to reach domestic workers. The only problem is that in those workshops, there will be people who are not domestic workers who will be there while information hasn't reached all domestic workers.
Marc, I mean, you mentioned productivity. Is a productivity or lack of a big factor insofar as business is concerned? In other words, is someone making an argument that we can't create jobs because South Africans are, I know this is perhaps very generalizing, are not productive enough?
Correct. And I must say that is a view that I subscribe to. I think we both have an unemployment crisis as well as a productivity crisis. And that's simply because, you know, so many young people in particular are so desperate just to earn a wage that they'll take on any job, even if that job is below their skill set. So I do suspect that, you know, programs like YES are phenomenal. They really are, because they give exposure to the working environment, and it gives young people a sense of purpose, and it breaks the routine of unemployment. You know, you get up in the morning to go to work, even if it's just for the year. But I do find fault in the YES type programs because they don't necessarily lead to skills development at the levels that are that are attuned to what a young individual might want. So I might just accept a YES placement because it's going to give me a pay packet at the end of the month, but it might not necessarily be in the industry sector that I'm really interested in. There is a massive job to matching the interest of the prospective employee with the job opportunity. One thought that just crosses my mind there, if I may just interject for a second, apropos domestic workers. You know, part of the biggest problem we face in our challenge in getting skills into the marketplace is that internet access, cost of internet, cost of data is a prohibitive factor. Domestic workers are invariably working in homes that are Wi-Fi enabled. Wouldn't it be amazing if South Africans took it upon themselves and I've lived this experiment, so it's not something brand new. I've actually had a domestic worker, which we have actually initially sent on computer skills training program. That individual then helped as my children were growing up with their homework, quite honestly, around ITC skills, and ultimately left my employ and are now, in fact, employed enough in the Africa Tikkun organization and a junior management position in an ICT academy. So my sense is if South Africans put their mind to it, let's stop waiting for assistance from government. There's so much that we can do amongst ourselves. This concept of a citizen-led change is something I really feel very strongly about. And I found that when we've done that, rather than waiting for government to contract us, we go out and we create. We create a disability initiative at the moment, disability inclusion initiative. I can only tell you government support has been phenomenal, but they didn't initiate this. This is something we amongst ourselves have initiated and are driving. And then government comes really providing an enabling environment, which is really what they're expected to do. We've got to move away from this mindset of waiting for government to provide the assistance. We've really got to just do it ourselves.
Pinky, I mean, you kept on talking about how skilled, that domestic workers actually have skills. Do you think that we take that for granted as households, yes, to the extent that we don't even recognize the fact that domestic workers actually have skills?
Most of employers do. There are a few employers like Marc who has taken a domestic worker to do some computer courses. There are employers who just see domestic workers as workers who are working in their house, who don't want to give them that opportunity to empower them, to educate them with something. Domestic workers can use their cell phones. As there are those who are using Wi-Fi at their employers' properties. They can use their cell phones. They can do a lot of things. And there are domestic workers who are domestic workers because of lack of job. There's no other job that they can do. They have qualifications. But we have seen some employers treating domestic workers as if they know nothing, as if they're the last people in the world because they are working for them. That balance of power and having that thing of that I'm superior, I'm paying Pinky, so I'm better than Pinky. There are employers who don't want to see the domestic workers doing better. That's a fact.
Mark, I mean,
and it's crazy because if we were to invest, every household was to just invest, and it's not big monies that are required. It's time and attention more than anything else, using the facilities that are already in place. You know, we lose sight of the fact that many of our domestic workers we entrust with our most valuable assets, our children, our elderly, our possessions in our home, and yet we're not prepared to invest in them. I think, frankly, that's not correct. I think we need to start looking at skills development within our own homes from those people who are amongst us are our closest. We all invest in our children and their education. Why aren't we investing in necessarily those very valuable people who are, helping us with the lives that we lead?
Pinky Mashiane, Marc Lubner, let me thank both of you for your time this afternoon.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.